Welcome to the Triad Arts Theater here in Yelm, Washington for the who's who of the Nisqually watershed from mountain to sea. Our sponsors for this show are Olympia Federal Savings, Keystone Masonry, Burnett Storage, Yelm Business Association, and the Triad Arts Theater. And now, the Mayor of Yelm, J.W. Foster.
Okay, you guys are good. Welcome to Yelm, everybody. It's a great night for a conversation. Tonight we're going to have Steve Craig interviewing Gary Edwards, new County Commissioner, in our second of the Who's Who in the Nisqually Watershed interview series.
Having a pleasure this evening to have the second in the series of Who's Who in the Nisqually Watershed, mountain to sea. Does everybody know what a watershed is? A watershed is the total drainage of the Nisqually River and its tributaries from mountain to sea. And so there are boundaries. So you reach a certain elevation and the drainage may be into the Puyallup watershed. And to the south we have the Deschutes watershed. The Nisqually watershed is defined by including 780 square miles. So it's has its source at the Nisqually Glacier and within Mount Rainier National Park, and its outfall is in the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge, which is unique in the United States. There are no other watershed that has that sort of flow arrangement. So that's what a watershed is. And the who's who, basically we're talking about people who are notable, but also people who are interesting. So we do not have a lock on who those people are, and if you have ideas about who you think should be interviewed to learn more about them, let us know, because I'm amazed at how many interesting and notable people there are in this watershed. So at this point, I'd like to interview our interviewee this evening, and he has quite a story. I think you're going to learn some things about this man that you didn't know, and of a personal nature. And that's the whole point, is to learn more about who you are living with in this watershed. So without further ado, I'd like to have County Commissioner Gary Edwards come in. By the way, some of you remember the television program, This Is Your Life, with Ralph Edwards?
I remember that.
Gary, are you related to Ralph Edwards?
Well, not that I know of, but if he's famous, good looking and rich, maybe I am.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get started here, and you're all aware that baseball training season is just getting underway.
Excuse me.
And so I thought the metaphor for the evening might be something like this, that Gary has agreed to be the batter, and I'm going to be the pitcher. So there might be some curveballs, a couple fastballs, maybe even a knuckleball, and a changeup, but all in good fun. We don't play gotcha here, so the questions that I ask are not intended to be in that vein at all. So let's get started. And by the way, there will be time at the end for Q&A. So we will continue to look at our watch, and we don't want to keep you here till midnight, so we'll try to do this within an hour or maybe just a little bit more than that.
Now, if I see other people out in the audience that ought to be up here, do you want me to call on them to get a little audience participation?
Listen, we are very flexible here at the Triad. And if you don't believe me, just ask Lady Jane here.
Okay.
So, the first questions that I have sort of relate to your family.
Sure.
You guys have been around here for a long time. In fact, I think the Edwards were here before it was even a state. In fact, it was a territory.
Well,
Is that true?
Actually, the Edwards side of the equation didn't really get here until about 1900. So, but the Longmire side of the equation showed up in the 1850s. And so that's the earliest part of it.
Now, when you say equation, did the Edwards sort of intermarry with the
That's
Longmires?
right, there you go. One of the Edwardses showed up here and married a young lady by the name of Jenny Conine, who was a granddaughter of James Longmire.
Okay.
And so J.C. Conine was her dad. And he's of note as well. I think he ran for sheriff once. Wasn't successful, ran for the legislature, and maybe did a term or two in the legislature in the late 1800s.
And, you know, I've often thought, because I run into people here in the Yelm area all the time, and say, oh, yeah, I'm related to Longmire, oh, yeah, Edwards, yeah, that's my cousin. And I've often thought that, gee, if they did a DNA analysis, they'd probably throw some of you guys in jail.
There is a distinct possibility, but I'll expand on that even a little bit.
Okay.
Because there is an old saying in the backwoods.
Yeah.
And it's, Mama's baby and Daddy's maybe. You know? Oh, I forgot, this is a family entertainment. I forgot that.
No, well, there's sort of a reputation for a little bit of moonshining and
Oh, yes.
here in the Bald Hills, right?
My grandpa Frank
Yeah,
supplied sugar to the Longmires of the day,
yeah,
because the Longmires were probably one of the heavier moonshiners in the neighborhood.
really? Did you guys know that?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Benny Longmire was actually the most, I think he was the most great of the whole bunch, you know, that, and he lived up by Elbow Lake, so some of you may be familiar.
So
You know how they delivered sugar in those days?
No.
Well, my dad was involved in that as a young man, and they would take sugar by the big bag, and I believe they were 100-pound bags.
Yeah,
The railroad would unload them over where the Yelm School District, so right across the way.
yeah,
That was the Wolf store,
you're right.
and the car would unload there, they'd put their order in, and then it was delivered to a certain location and left at that location. And it was either paid for ahead of time,
Yeah,
all cash in those days, you
Right.
know. And if it wasn't paid for ahead of time, it was paid for on the spot, but it was in a coffee can. And then nobody knew who was doing business with who, so the federal folks would show up, you know, the
revenue.
dry squad, yeah, revenuers or whatever, and they'd quiz different, well, I don't know, I just took some sugar up and dropped it off. That was the way it was done.
Oh, this sounds like the stuff of a movie.
I think there is some history that would lead to that at one point or another.
Well, I was gonna ask you, I hadn't intended to bring that up, but that's an interesting side story that, maybe we come back to that later, but you grew up here in
Yes.
this area, and so what was your childhood experience like? And a lot of people don't even realize you graduated from Yelm High School.
Well, I used to tease EJ quite a bit.
Is that right?
So, anyway, yeah, I never made it very far from home. I was born and raised right here.
Yeah.
You know, haven't left. I went off in the Army for a while. I was a policeman back east for a little bit. And other than that, I've been hanging around right here in the Northwest.
So, as a teenager, any crazy stories about you?
Yeah, but I'm not sure the statute of limitations is up.
Were you pretty tame or kind of a wild kid, or how would you sort of describe it?
I had a lot of fun as a young man.
I think I get it.
Yeah. But I worked hard.
Yeah. And,
If you look back on my social security number, you know, the statement that you get,
yeah,
I think I was about 11 years old when I started working for wages on a farm, and that farm belonged to Chet Reichel.
That's an old family here.
That's another family.
Yeah. Now, you live out there in Lake Lawrence now, right?
Yes, in the old homestead place.
That's the old homestead. So originally, was that, how many acres was the original homestead? Was it 600?
You know, it could have been in that area, but the lake is there.
Yeah.
And so I think they took that 600 and took the portion of the lake out with some of the acreage. So I think it was only about 400 acres at the time.
But still, that's a substantial piece of real
Oh,
estate.
yeah, we did logging and cattle and dairy.
Yeah. If some of the audience haven't been out there, there's a pavilion that some of you might be aware of that's out there that is very substantial. It's very large and can help. You describe this pavilion and why was it built and kind of the story behind that.
Well, I guess I can
it's
talk about it now because I'm not the sheriff anymore.
Yeah.
But that building was built in 1926, and Frank Edwards built that. And
For what purpose?
well, he said that it was to put hay in. It's kind of a funny hay barn if you look at it.
Yeah, it's open.
And what it ended up being was a very premium dance hall of its day.
Yeah.
All the big name bands came out there, and they did have hay in there for a little bit. Now, whether there was some trickery involved, I don't think they had a permit application that they had to fill out, you know. But when they built that, then they went immediately into the Prohibition era, and there was a lot of that moonshine activity out there, so people that were partaking of that moonshine also attended the dance. And it was a different way to do business in those days.
And that pavilion is still in good condition.
Yeah. And that was built, like I say, in 1926. It's been refurbished, you know, with some interior paneling, had a roof change a few times, that type of thing. But the basic structure of that building is the same.
Is it used for entertainment or events these days?
Yes, the Lawrence Lake Community Club now owns that building, maintains it, and actually leases it out for weddings and just social events.
Okay, Gary, you have an interesting career, and I'd like to kind of delve into a little bit about that. You know, you graduated from high school. In the green room, you mentioned that you were setting children, you were in kind of logging, and kind of describe how you kind of got into law enforcement.
Well, I was drafted in 1965, and so I did my military time, and at the end of that run, they had a program called Operation Transition, and they tried to teach all the young men that were interested some type of a trade. And I don't recall how many different trades, but I know being a fireman and a policeman were two of the things that you could sign up for. And I had the opportunity, I was in Fort Irwin, California at the time, and that is a tank training center that General George Patton trained in. And Barstow, California is pretty close, and the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office in California was there, and they hosted a police academy called the Post Academy, Police Officer Standards Training. And so I had an opportunity to go through that at the military's expense, taxpayer expense. And so I ended up with a post certificate, and then that's what got me into law enforcement a little later on. I mean, I graduated and went on with that certificate, and I worked in the woods. I actually had a run-in with the police that actually got me into law enforcement.
Describe that. Describe that experience.
Well, I was a young man, had 1.5 kids at the time, and my mother-in-law was along, and my wife was along, and one baby, and my wife was pretty far along. And we were at the McDonald's station on Pacific Avenue at 72nd Street in Tacoma.
I know where that is.
The McDonald's is still there.
Yeah.
Way fancier than it was in those days. And I'm not sure they had inside seating, but there was a police car backed up near there, and they had problems with young people in those days, and I think the police would park there once in a while, kind of keep an eye on what was going on. Anyway, we had stopped in there for a hamburger, and the garbage can was on my wife's side of the car. So I'm kind of not very proud of this, because I should have got out of the car, walked around, got the garbage from my wife, but I didn't. The can was right there. I said, well, you know.
Give it a talk.
Well, so anyway, she got out, she went to push the garbage in, and it was one of those domed with a lid, and she pushed it in, and it would not take it. It was plumb full. Well, now she's already out of the car, so right over here, there's another garbage can. And so she kind of looked. Wasn't I a big help, if you think about it? You know, I was able to point, you know. Anyway, so, and she went over to put the garbage in that garbage can, and it was full too. And now remember, she's big, and I kind of give her some help, you know, from the car, behind the steering wheel. You know. And so she pushed it, and a cup fell out on the ground. And the police car was right here, close.
Yeah.
I didn't think much about it. And she kind of looked at me, oh, come on, let's go. You know, we were in a hurry, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And she got about halfway across the parking lot, and a young officer was riding with an older officer, and he was driving, and he yelled out his window, he said, lady, I don't know, what can I say here? Can I say what he said?
Yes, go
Not
ahead.
too bad.
Go ahead.
Get your ass over here. And that's what he said to her,
Yeah.
to my wife, you know. And I was this young, energetic lawyer, or a logger, that thought I could whip the world.
Yeah.
So, as soon as I heard that, that got me out of my car. So I jumped out, and I ran around the car, and she was walking over, and she got there about the same time I did. And I proceeded to open the car door on the squad car, and I was going to talk to him about manners. And my wife got in between us. And the senior officer, I could see him, he was grabbing the junior guy, because he also, you know, I don't know, we're young fellas full of testosterone, I suppose, you know. And he's being pulled back one way, and my wife's pulling me back the other way. And I had a few words with the officer, and then we got back in the car and left. And, well, it wasn't 10 seconds later, and the patrol car pulls in behind us. Pretty soon the light comes on. And that officer came up. Now you have to realize, same one.
Yeah.
We went from a very bad situation to a very cordial situation. He walked up very professionally. He said, sir, could I see your driver's license and registration, please? We didn't need insurance in those days. You know, that's the next question.
Yeah.
Anyway, very polite and professional. I got my wallet out and dug through things. He got it. I'll be back in a moment, sir. You know, and he was very polite, walked back to the patrol car. Pretty soon he came back with a ticket. Well, you know, when you're a young man and you've got a 59 Chevrolet 2-door hardtop with a hot rod motor and stuff, a little loud, mufflers. He gave me a ticket for bad mufflers. So we proceeded on our way, and he went his way, no more contact. A friend of mine helped me write a letter to the chief of police about that incident in Tacoma. And I've still got that letter somewhere. And in the letter, kind of explained the situation, and we felt we were getting a raw deal, but put $10 in it and sent it in. That's all the ticket was, $10 in those days.
Yeah.
And anyway, maybe a week or two later, here comes a letter back in the mail from the chief. And the chief explained that I had not had any contact with law enforcement, so my ticket was being changed to a warning. And they sent me a check back. They didn't send the $10. Anyway, so I got the $10 back, basically a check form. And the letter went on to say that I've looked into your complaint, and it seems like both parties involved, myself and the officer, might have overreacted to a situation. Okay, well, I didn't think it was quite like that, because I had heard what the officer said. You know, tip my hat to the gals and all that kind of stuff, old-fashioned type stuff, you know. Anyway, so the ticket was changed. He said the officer's been counseled, and thank you very much for bringing this to my attention. And you know, I thought, I think I'm gonna be a policeman. I'd already been through the school, but
Yeah, yeah.
I'd been in and out of the Army, went through the school, and right away then, that did it. I'm gonna get into law enforcement. I'm gonna treat people the way I'd like to be treated in a like situation, and that's what I did for 40 years.
And how long were you, and this was with the Thurston County?
Well, this was the Tacoma Police Department.
You were in the, you started in the Tacoma?
No, as far as my law enforcement career,
Yeah.
no, actually, my wife got homesick. She was from Wisconsin,
Yeah,
and she wanted to go back by her family.
okay.
So I went back there because there was an opening on the police department where she lived, in Rock County, Wisconsin. So I worked there for 7 years, and then I came out here for a couple of years to Oregon, to Douglas County, Oregon, that's in Roseburg.
Okay.
And I worked there a couple of years. Then I came up here and went to work for the sheriff's office. Been here ever since.
And so, how many years?
Well, I did 40 altogether because I did a little stint with Homeland Security after I retired.
Oh, and, but how long had you been on the force before you decided to run for sheriff? And what sort of motivated you to run for sheriff?
See, I must have been on about, I think I had about 18 years in.
Uh-huh.
And then I ran for sheriff and did another 20 as sheriff. And then I did 2 more with Homeland
What
Security.
prompted you to run for sheriff?
Well, I hate to talk ill of those that aren't with us anymore, but there was some discrepancies that had been going on with the administration of the sheriff's office. I guess that's as polite as I can put it. I just thought, you know, I always felt if I was ever the sheriff, I was gonna do things differently. And I thought, well, I guess I'm never gonna be the sheriff if I don't run for sheriff.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of people, and had a lot of help, and so the community got me elected, and I went down and spent 5 terms down there.
That seems to me to be, that's a pretty good run, isn't it? 20 years? Are there many
Well,
sheriffs
it's on-
that last 20 years?
I don't think there's been one in Thurston County that did 20 consecutive years.
Yeah.
I think a gentleman by the name of Billings had done, I think he did 21 years somehow. And what it was, he quit mid-term on one term and went to the Alaska Gold Rush.
Mhm.
Didn't make his fortune and came back and I guess ran again. And so he had a break of a couple of years in there.
Yeah.
But I think he served longer in total, but not consecutively.
So you retired in 2007?
I walked out the door in January of 2007.
And now, under normal circumstances, one would have been satisfied with a very successful career, and you had a very successful career. And then you decided you're going to run for county commissioner. What sort of prompted that?
You remember, I told you I got drafted in 1965 by the government?
Yeah.
Well, in 2016, I got drafted by the public because of an unpopular government. And so it really wasn't part of my retirement. Anyway, so again, the community got me elected again. You don't get elected in a countywide race by yourself.
No,
It takes the total community. You know, different ones take exception once in a while when I quote this, but I think Hillary Clinton was right when she said it takes a village. I mean, it's a total concept, though, if you think about it. It takes a village, it takes a town, it takes a community. So that's how I ended up going back down as county commissioner as well.
But there were some issues that you saw needed to be addressed that weren't necessarily being addressed, or if they were addressed, that there were problems with those.
Well, let me say that before I get into that, I want to preface that with, I have a newfound respect for those that have held the position of county commissioner. So I'll say that early on, because of the complications that go into the job. So, and I like to think the best of people, but there were some very poor decisions made down at the courthouse. And because of those decisions, we ended up having a jail that was $60 million, and it was sitting there empty for 5 years. And I had told the commissioners at the time not to build the jail because I knew the Nisqually tribe was building a jail, and that was going to alleviate any jail overcrowding that we had. So there really was no need for us to spend that money at that time and build a jail. And they didn't have a business plan. And the tribe did have a business plan. They were going to lease bed space to other jurisdictions to pay for their operation. That's generally how a county jail is run as well, at least to offset some of the expenses. Anyway, they chose to go ahead and build it anyway. They made a couple other bad financial decisions that were costing the taxpayers a lot of money. And I had a lot of people that were coercing me at every turn. I think some of them are in the audience tonight, and they kind of talked me into this. And I thought, well, and what I was always hearing was, you know about county government, you've been elected, you know the process, you know. And I actually had supported 4 other people running for county commissioner, hoping somebody could get elected that would bring some common sense down there. Both Democrats and Republicans. And anyway, it wasn't successful, so I held a fundraiser for Bud Blake. Bud is currently a county commissioner. He got elected 2 years ago. During his election, we had a bunch of folks out to the house, and I told him if Bud gets elected, he can't do anything because he needs a majority vote to change things, but he could at least go down and check things out. And hopefully someone else would see that he got elected, some young energetic person would step forward and run for the office, and then he'd have 2 votes. And if that young energetic person didn't step forward, I'd do it myself. So I'm always opening my mouth and put my foot in this time. So here I am. I said I'd do it, nobody else stepped forward, and so I did it, and again, with the help of the community, we ended up down at the courthouse.
You ran as an independent, and I think many people know that you probably have conservative leanings, but there's a story behind the fact that you ran as an independent. This wasn't something new for you.
No.
Could you tell us the story about your thoughts on some of these elected positions being independent rather than political?
Well, what happened on that, Steve, was when I ran for sheriff, you had to run as a partisan, either Democrat or a Republican.
Yeah.
The law is different now. It changed about the time Snaza got elected sheriff. I'm pretty sure that was the time frame in there. It changed in there. Anyway, I always thought it should be an independent position. The same as a judge. I mean, you don't want a judge asking, are you a Republican or a Democrat before I pass sentence, you know?
Right.
And I felt the same way about law enforcement. But the current sheriff was a Republican, and I just felt, from a strategy standpoint, it was better to run against him in the primary, and I felt that I had a better chance with the primary election. And so that's what I did. I filed and ran as a Republican. Not that I have Republican leanings. I don't try to hide that when you say conservative. But I've always thought it should be separate from the office. I see no room for partisan politics in the office. But yet I had to run as a Republican, and I got elected as a Republican, and I got elected 4 more times after that as a Republican. But every year for that 20-year period, I went to the legislature and tried to get them to change the position of sheriff to an independent position, but they wouldn't do it. And if the Republicans were in charge, they'd say the Democrats are holding it up. If the Democrats were in charge, they'd say the Republicans were holding it up. So in actuality, neither partisan body wanted to give it up. And the reason for it is there's a coattail effect. And if you go probably out in the audience today and say, you know, who's the assessor or auditor, and it used to be county commissioner, but now it's become such a high profile position, they might know, but mostly the public doesn't know who holds some of those other offices. But if you would ask 100 people coming out of the Safeway store who the sheriff is, whether it was me at the time or whether it was John Snaza, they probably could tell you, a good percentage of them, I don't know, probably 75% could say, oh yeah, Edwards or Snaza or whomever it was. And that coattail effect has an effect on the whole down ballot issues, if you will. And I think that's why they didn't want to give it up. So I didn't always win every battle that I took on. That was one I didn't win. So that's why when I decided to run, I thought, well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, I guess, and run as an independent. And here I am.
It worked. Well, Gary, it's been a little over a month since you took office. What's it been like so far, and any surprises?
There's a learning curve, and if we go from, I'm going to say if we go from first grade to high school graduation, let's just use that, 12 years. Pretty steep learning curve. I'm not even out of kindergarten yet. That's how, that is, it's really, and that's why I prefaced what I was talking about on the county commission position. I would like to think even those that were in the position just weren't making good decisions. And that might have been because they didn't have a good understanding. And I'm finding that now, so I have a better respect for the position, I guess, because there are so many moving parts that are intertwined, and one thing affects another. And so on a lot of the issues that the public was so upset about as we were going into the campaign, we're reversing those things. But wow, it took 20 years for us to get there. And we're getting them done one at a time, you know. We're picking them off one at a time. But it is a very complicated process. You just can't go in and give it the axe, you know, or fire somebody or change something. You have to follow the procedures laid out. If you don't, there's no point in doing it because it won't hold up.
Now, there are 3 county commissioners, and the county has grown substantially in the last 20, 30 years. I recall, I think it was actually back in the 80s, there was a county charter proposition on the ballot and also simultaneous with that, there were some freeholders who were running to be part of the charter process should the charter process itself be approved.
Right.
Well, it was not approved, so it did not proceed. But the thinking at that time was because of the growth, and this relates to the fact that we have 3 county commissioners, and you haven't been there very long, so maybe you don't have a good sense just yet. What is the workload for 3 county commissioners?
It's substantial. I'm not sure that having 5 county commissioners would lessen the workload, other than maybe committee assignments. It would help in that regard. But where the rub really comes, and just a little background maybe for the audience, is that it's been attempted 2 different times here in Thurston County that I'm aware of. And again, they do the freeholder thing, and then they put the charter on, and what do you think? And it's been voted down both times. But you have several different options of having some appointed and some elected offices. And for those of you that have been around a long time, Sheriff Janovich in Pierce County, before Pierce County became a charter county, he was involved in corruption with organized crime.
I recall that.
He was convicted and sent to prison. And the county at the time thought, well, maybe if we develop a charter concept, we can get away from this corruption and get on, and maybe things will be more efficient, work better. Well, they did that, but they ended up feeling that the sheriff should still be elected. So he was appointed there for quite a few years. Then, about 10 or 12 years ago, the charter in Pierce County went back to, during the review process, had the sheriff go back to an elected position. And so that kind of vindicated my position for keeping it an elected position, even though if you look at going back to your charter, you can lay all that out, but once you have the charter in place, then you can make constitutional changes. That's one of the things I'm against. I hate to open up the Constitution because I think our forefathers really put some thought into our Constitution, both at the federal and at the state level. So there's a concern there. And I would like to maintain the elected offices being elected because I just think it keeps them accountable to the public. So if we were to go to a charter, that's possible, that could be put in the charter. Some of the ones that were proposed, that was kind of left out in the gray area. So if there were 5 county commissioners as proposed in the last charter, it's not that it would maybe lessen the workload, but at least 2 county commissioners could talk about a particular issue without there being a session being advertised ahead of time and announced, and that quorum being in place open to the public. So in other words, if you and I were both commissioners and there were 3 other commissioners, under that 5-commissioner program, you and I could talk about, hey Steve, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you think Bill will agree with us? You know, government could proceed a little better, because right now, amongst the 3 of us, any 2 of us can't get together. So you're not allowed, I mean, it's not that you can't get together, but there's the perception that maybe you're talking about public business.
Yeah.
And you're prohibited
Yeah.
from talking about public business. And I think that was enacted in 1972. And that's the Open Public Meetings Act. You can't have a quorum. If there's a council that consists of 5 people, 3 of them cannot get together, but at least 2. And you know, we have offices that are side by side up there, and we can't talk. There's no sharing of information, and we can't do what's called serial communication either. So you're my buddy, and you're also Bud's buddy. I can't go to you, hey Steve, ask Bud what he thinks about this. That's called the serial communication. Can't do that.
So can I ask you if you've had a conversation with the other 2 about the charter or some alternative way of dealing with this? Or can you even discuss it?
Oh yeah, we can discuss anything in a public meeting.
Yeah.
And we have public meetings regularly.
Yeah.
And it isn't that we have anything to hide from the public. It's just that during those public meetings, they are 100% booked. And we've got staff presenting or citizens presenting information to us.
Yeah.
And we're sitting right next to each other, and we do not have time to carry on a conversation. And when the meeting's over, I make a motion to adjourn. Can't talk anymore. And that's the way it is. And so we're trying to live by the spirit of the law. Now, we've got a briefing coming up from council, I think it's next week, and I'm gonna kind of lay things out. Hey, look, if you wanna go somewhere, just you can't talk about your public processes as a county commissioner and how you might perceive things or vote on things. You can talk about the ball game, if you will, and see how many pass pitches you're gonna throw or whatever, you know, we can talk about things like that, talk about the kids.
Yeah.
But we have to be very careful not to talk about public business. And what that does is it impedes the public process tremendously. You know, I mentioned it's a slow process to getting things through. because all the public meetings have to be announced ahead of time, be planned ahead of time, out on the agenda 24 hours ahead of time, 48 hours in certain types. So there's a lot of little complications that the public doesn't know.
Is it conceivable that it's probably too early, kind of into your position to even discuss it at this point, but say a couple of years from now, is it conceivable that you three county commissioners could make a public statement that, based on your experience, you're suggesting that maybe it's time for the county to think about a charter and a different way of doing business? Is that conceivable?
Oh, I think so. The county population is about, I want to say 275,000. I think it's close.
Mm-hmm.
When it reaches 300,000, then by RCW, we can become a 5-council county, a 5-member
Automatically.
county automatically. Well, not automatically. We can create that through a process not as complicated as the county charter.
Does that require a public vote?
I believe it just requires a public vote. You have to lay the districts out, put it up for a vote, but you don't have to develop that whole charter concept and open up the Constitution.
I think.
My concern is not that I've got anything to hide, but I am very concerned about any time we tinker with the Constitution. I'm kind of a constitutional guy. If you remember, during my campaign, I said if I win the election, we're going to have the Constitution posted at the courthouse. If you go down there today, there's 3 big panels. It's the state constitution, the federal constitution, and the Pledge of Allegiance up in the courthouse.
Do you see people reading it?
Well, it's not verbatim. It's an artistic facsimile, I guess, of the Constitution. It starts off, we the people, and it goes into part of it, and the state constitution the same way. But the reason I did the Pledge of Allegiance was I always felt that we should include the public more in the process. And we do the Pledge of Allegiance at the opening of our county meetings.
Right.
So I like to ask citizens that are in attendance if they would like to lead the Pledge of Allegiance for the group. And, a lot of people are bashful. There aren't very many people like us that just jump out here and, hey, have we ever met a stranger? I guess not, but that are willing to get up there and lead the pledge, for an example. So it's right there in bold print so they won't forget, maybe get a little stage fright, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everybody's different. But I wanted that to be there so that people would feel comfortable in participating.
Well, not only that, it seems to me that it has an educational value.
Well, I suppose, because
There are people that haven't read it.
Well, and not only that, I don't even know if they talk about it in school anymore, to be honest with you. That's a whole other topic we could get into.
Okay, I don't think this is a fastball, maybe it's a knuckleball, but we're going to get into kind of some little bit of detail here.
Okay.
Okay, so you took office, and out there in the landscape, there are a lot of people who have signs up relative to private property rights, and and that probably was even a factor in you being elected.
Very much so.
And
I am a property rights advocate. I don't hide.
And what's your take on that? And has the county been about right, or has it overreached relative to some of these things related to property rights?
Well, everybody's got an opinion on it, I suppose, but my opinion is that there's been a severe overreach by government in general. Not just the county, but government in general. And that was a big part of my platform in running for office. And I believe the Constitution addresses the process. When you're going to deny someone the use of their property as they see fit, I think they're due a compensation package for that. And, the federal Constitution It's Fifth Amendment, last sentence in the Fifth Amendment says, "There shall be no taking without just compensation." Taking has been adjudicated at the Supreme Court level, and taking actually means taking, just taking. You don't have it anymore. Taking does not mean changing the value per se, or limiting the use as long as you've still got it. Well, our forefathers knew when they developed the Washington State Constitution that there had already been abuses, and that was, already 100 and some years ago. They're looking back to our original founding fathers, and hey, I don't know, they didn't cover that quite right. So if you look at the clause, the taking clause in the Washington State Constitution, it refers to "there shall be no taking or damaging without just compensation." Damaging is a big word. I feel we need to utilize the Constitution to protect the state citizens, and using damaging as part of that is where I'm coming from on that whole property rights issue. If they're going to tell you that you can't use this property, I don't know, it's got a gopher on it, whatever it is.
That's my next question.
Okay, we'll go there next then. But if you can't use your property, and they're setting it aside for the public good, the preservation of that gopher, that's a taking and damaging. Now that person that has that property needs to be compensated. Now, that could get spendy, but the thing is, the compensation, if it's going to be done for the public good, it has to be done for everyone's benefit. So everyone has to participate in paying for that taking. So that's a big issue with me, is the taking and damaging clause of our state constitution.
Okay, well, let's talk about the gopher. And they have sort of an underground network going on.
Where they are underground.
So you're coming into kind of a situation that's, shall we say, slightly complicated, and it involves the federal government, it involves state government, and now you're having to deal with it at the county level. So as you've arrived on the scene, where do things currently stand, and where do you see this going?
Well, that little gopher, and it's the Mazama pocket gopher, and it resides throughout the Northwest, not just here in Thurston County, but throughout the Northwest. The issue is that the federal Fish and Wildlife folks have determined that there are 14 subspecies of the Mazama pocket gopher. One of them is the Yelm prairie pocket gopher. I think there's another one.
There's a Roy pocket.
Yeah, I think there's a Roy pocket gopher. I don't know if they signed up for addresses at the post office or what that was all about.
Territorial.
But it doesn't make any sense, because if you put all 14 of them down here on the table, you cannot tell the difference between any of them. And what they've done is they've said there's a DNA difference, but they've not allowed DNA testing. So I don't know how that has come about. The government scientists have had gophers that they've tested, but those that want to appeal the Endangered Species Act have asked for samples to test. You know, like to be sure, they would have to go get their own.
Right.
They won't give them a permit to get their own gopher to test it. So there's no assurance that the government is telling the truth, and to be honest with you, I don't trust the government. And there's some specific reasons. One of them, there was a gentleman here that was in charge of the Federal Fish and Wildlife Program. His name was Ken Berg. About 3 years ago, he came to a meeting at a residence out here. I don't know, how in-depth are we supposed to go on this stuff?
I think you're
Telling people's addresses and names and stuff, right? Anyway, we had him come out because from a business perspective, how is this going to affect us prior to the listing? They assured us at that time that it would not affect schools, the municipal boundaries of jurisdictions, the growth management area of jurisdictions in otherwise smaller lots, you know, not to say it couldn't affect a bigger lot subdivision, for an example. Agriculture wasn't going to affect agriculture. There was several other caveats they put in there. This, no problem, we're going to take care of this little critter and this won't be a problem. I'm working with the Yelm School District today. They're expanding the campus out where the Yelm High School is. It's on the main highway, Highway 510, busy. About 1,600 kids go to school out there right now. They're moving the freshman class out there. It's going to be 400 more kids. So that campus is going to be 2,000 kids plus all the teachers and parents and citizens that go to functions out there. That ingress and egress, they refer to it, in and out,
Right.
is off the highway. I mean, it's a real hazard. So the school has purchased some property and they've got a conceptual plan put in place where the freshman building is going to be. And they want to build a road in through there, but there's pocket gophers in the way. Now, can you believe that that pocket gopher has precedence over our school kids in the dark of winter, whether it's day or night? They're, you know, in the summer it's not quite so bad because they're not in session and it's daylight.
Yeah.
But in the dark of winter, they're trying to cross the road, go to school, go to functions, and we've had several kids hit out there by cars. We've had accidents where people are slamming on their brakes and such. But the federal government feels that gopher is more important than those kids. And so when people say, why don't you trust the government? Well, that's just one example of why I don't trust the government. They've lied to us on numerous occasions, and we could get into many other arenas where the government has been less than truthful. I guess that's the more politically correct way to put it. But
Well, what do you see, where does it stand right now? Is there an impasse right now?
Yeah,
are they waiting for more data and information? Or just what?
okay, we're kind of at an impasse right now. We're in negotiations with the federal folks.
And when you say the federal folks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
Fish and Wildlife, that's right. As to what kind of leeway we can get for people. Now, just to give you a couple of examples of what we're dealing with, if your house burns down today and you go to replace it, you got to get a gopher inspection. You know, same footprint. You want to just rebuild. Maybe it didn't burn all the way down. You're going to have to tear the rest of it down. Put it on the same footprint. Insurance is ready to pay. Oh no, I don't know. They might have a clause. Maybe you're going to be out your insurance if you don't get your house up pretty quick. Can't get a permit. Got to wait for the gopher. You know, even on that footprint. So there are and we were told that was not going to take effect either. Wasn't going to affect those small parcels, situations like that. Again, we were misled. Whether it was purposefully or not, I only have my ideas. But anyway, it's just taken the priority. It's out of control. We do have a plan in place to address that through a negotiation process, but I'm also taking information from the school as well as St. Martin's College. They have a hold up on their construction projects out there because of the gopher. I believe it's Olympia School District has got a hang up as well. As soon as there is an Interior Secretary appointed, and I believe it's going to be a congressman out of Montana that's going to take over.
That's what they said.
Then I plan on contacting the Interior Secretary, taking this example of what gophers are really more important than kids, using that as an example and asking for relief. I think we've got a pretty good chance of getting relief in that regard. Now you have to remember, we've got a president that went into office saying he didn't like this over-regulatory reach business by government, that it's detrimental to business and people in general. Hopefully that will be reflected down the chain through the Attorney General. The United States Attorney in Seattle will be new. The new Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will be a new person, and the Interior Secretary.
So everything's kind of on hold?
Well, it's kind of on hold for the next month. We don't have an interior secretary. I haven't had a chance to look at the news lately, but do we?
Well, there's plenty of it out there, I'll tell you.
Yeah, is there? Anyway, that's the holdup in that regard.
Now, when you say negotiations, are the county commissioners doing the negotiations?
Yes, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Yeah, okay, the three of you?
Yes,
And so all three of you sit down with representatives from Fish and Wildlife Service?
in a public meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
and negotiate.
Yep. That's where we're at.
Are
With our staff, we had a meeting this afternoon, actually.
Really? How'd it go?
Why don't you ask me, did we solve the problem yet? That'd be easier to answer. No, but we're
Did
making
you make any
headway.
progress?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
fine. Well, see, the thing is, those folks that are in key positions at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they know things are changing.
Yeah.
None of us know exactly what's going to happen, but we all know things are changing. They would like to get this done probably closer to their side of the equation.
Right.
We know things are changing too, and we want to get it done closer to our side of the equation for the citizens.
Yeah.
So, we're in the middle of negotiations. I would think we'll have a much better understanding, let's say in a month. If anybody's interested, there is a public meeting next week as part of this negotiation process.
Yeah.
We're gonna be in public meetings, not over just this issue. A lot of code, zoning, ordinance type things have to come into consideration as well. So we'll be discussing all of them. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but we're gonna have one whole day designated for dealing with the gopher. And anybody that's interested and has the capability could go to the county website. It's all posted well ahead of time.
Now, did you ever think when you were sheriff that you were going to become a gopher expert? I bet you're becoming pretty knowledgeable.
Well, but there's about 100 other topics that we're dealing with too. I don't know how many of you are aware of the Hearst decision. It's a Washington State Supreme Court decision of, just came out recently. It's affecting water rights tremendously. So that's a whole other issue. I'll be meeting with the Nisqually River Council tomorrow here in Yelm.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
The environment is a big concern of ours. And how many people know that Victoria, BC pumps millions of gallons of raw sewage every day into the Strait of Juan de Fuca, right into the Puget Sound?
Yeah, that's damn
And they claim to be environmentally sensitive. Take a look at the Fraser River and the sawmills and the mines.
Well, I know the state of Washington has been complaining for decades.
And, I plan on doing something about it.
You are?
I come from that old philosophy, go
Yeah.
big or go home.
Yeah? What are you gonna do?
I plan on putting together a coalition
Yeah,
of tribal interests
yeah,
and counties around the Puget Sound and say enough is enough. Our congressman, Denny Heck, has some money.
yeah,
He got, I think, $400 or $500 million towards Puget Sound cleanup.
yeah.
I'm gonna bug him and see if I can't get some money out of his pocket to pay for some public service ads. And we're gonna put those ads on TV and say, folks, please don't go to Canada and spend your money, because if you flush the toilet, you're killing us.
Yeah.
Really? I'm not kidding you, I'm serious as a dead horse. It's going to pay off, because the only way you affect change in today's modern situation is through the pocketbook.
Yeah.
And they survive on tourist dollars.
You're actually an environmentalist.
I am an environmentalist.
All right.
But you know what? I don't know very many people that aren't good stewards of the land. Some are. There's some butts out there, no doubt about it. But the reality is, most people want to take care of their place and their property, and I don't know anybody that doesn't want clean water.
Yeah. I wish you great success, and
You'll hear more about this when we come to that meeting.
I have a feeling you're gonna get some traction on it.
I think so.
Okay, next subject is the septic tank fee. this started out as something that kind of made sense for people living along the marine shoreline because they're shellfish and they were being affected, health issues, etc. But now it's sort of expanded to, we want all of you in the county to pay a septic fee. And I think there are a lot of people who say sometimes you don't trust government, but I think there's some suspicion out there that is this just an angle to generate revenue for the county?
Well, I'm not going to say it's not an angle to generate revenue, because I'm not 100% on that, because it wasn't that much, but it was millions. And I feel that all the bureaucracies that we've got in place today started off small. Maybe except the TSA. The TSA started off big right away, it seemed like, you know, when they put that in place.
Yeah.
But most bureaucracies start off small, and then they grow and justify their existence. And so septic systems probably fall within that area, if you will. And here's the deal about septic systems. First of all, I believe all public policy should be based on truth, but the whole truth, just not the convenient truth for you, the whole truth, both sides of the equation. So I know one of the things that came about during this public meeting process with the septic situation, if you will, was that there was a 14% failure rate. Well, anybody that could do math could see that, let's see, 14% a year in 7 years, what, everybody's failing in 7, that's not true. Doesn't pencil out. And everybody could ask their neighbors, has your tank failed lately? Years later? No. I live in a house that's 120 years old, but the septic system's only been in since 1930 because we didn't have power until 1930 when the rural electrification program came in. Then everybody got running water and inside toilets and stuff. So before that, we didn't need it, you know, outhouse deal. So now that a lot of those septic systems that were put in that time frame weren't the best. Now I have to say, my grandpa put in a good system, and I happened to dig it up about 15 years ago. So it had been in place for just over 70 years when I dug it up, right after 2000. And the reason I dug it up, my mom was living there. She said, you know, something's not working. Plugged up, you know, I don't need to get into detail. Anyway, it wasn't working. So I went out, dug it up, and my grandpa had poured a two-chambered, big two-chambered tank with a bottom in it.
Yeah.
Some of them don't have a bottom, with a bottom in it. With baffles in place for in and out. You know, the Romans figured this out about 2,000 years ago.
They did.
So it wasn't rocket science, you know.
Yeah.
And that tank was working fine. The roots had gotten into the drain field area and plugged the drain field enough near the tank because it was going out through the orchard. So I took the lids off, and the forms, the wooden forms, when he poured the tank, were still there. They were obviously rotten, but they were still there. That tank had never been opened up and pumped in 70 years. Now, during that time frame, you know, all the chemicals and bleaches and detergents probably hadn't been used to the extent in a modern home that they get used. So that you have to take that into consideration as well. But that tank is working just fine yet today. We fixed the drain field problem, working fine. So when they tell you that your system's going to fail within a 7-year period, that's just not true. Well, in digging into that, what that 14% really came from was the Henderson watershed area was where they initially started this whole process of let's clean up our septic systems and fix the water.
Relative to the marine shoreline.
Yes, relative to the marine shoreline, that's right. Well, what they were finding, there was a combination of shallow soils and hard pan that was going into each one of those drainages. And instead of a nice system that my grandpa put in, there was a 1914 Ford buried there. And, you know, that was the drain, the whole system. That's all they had, you know.
Well, you're raising a good question here, Gary, because there's a lot of clay hard pan over on those peninsulas that extend
Yes.
out into Puget Sound.
That's right.
But out here, we have a totally different.
Totally
soil
different
regime.
situation.
Is that being taken into account?
Well, it wasn't taken into account. That's the problem. It was not. So when you go and check around the salt water in those areas that are sensitive,
Yeah.
and the soil situation was
Right.
bad,
Yeah.
so when you had that 1914 Ford, you know, buried in there, somebody had a cabin that was probably built in the turn of the century, they got power eventually, and did something like that just to get by. It was just kind of leaching along that hard pan
Yeah.
and contaminating the water.
Right.
So, if you just took and counted all those homes, and you know, they were cabins, then they were remodeled, and then they were homes, and eventually they were tore down and nice places put up with good systems. Pump up, sand filter, whatever it needed to do it right. So, if you would just look at what was done during that time frame, say from 1900 to 1970, for example, there were some bad systems all along there. And yeah, I bet they had 20% failure, if not more, in those. But the problem is, you get back into prairie ground like where we're at here, and you can have a system that lasts 70 years without any problem. So it wasn't the whole truth. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth.
Gary, how are they defining a system failure?
Well, it has to do with those complicated soil issues. So that plays into it. And then they'll do dye tests and how far away from each system, again, depending on the
Well,
soil.
is that the concept? They're gonna collect a fee, and then somebody from the county, they're gonna rotate over a period of time, you know, they're gonna visit your system and inspect it, and, you know, the question is, what are they gonna be looking for? Rock sewage flowing out on the
Well,
surface of the
to a
land?
degree.
Now, I have a well and a septic tank. I keep them apart
Separate?
because I'm drinking out of that well, right?
Everybody I know does that.
Yeah. So are they, if my water quality seems to be good, is that gonna be an indication that my septic system is performing?
Well,
Or
more,
are they gonna be looking at something? And I guess my question is this. I'm sure most of the people in the audience don't know where this stands right now. You know, we will get bits and pieces in the newspaper that it's out there and that there's probably gonna be a fee, but nothing's finalized just yet. Is that true?
that's true.
And the discussion is continuing, and is that internal, or are there people from the state and the feds involved, or how would you describe this process
Well,
briefly?
there is regulation that comes on septics. It's not from the feds to the state, but it is from the state to the county. So there is a regulatory process that has to be followed, and it has to do with plans that cover certain permitting and installation processes depending on those soil conditions. So there's a lot of variables that come into play. And the way this is going to work is that we're going to be taking public input, not next week, but the week after that. We've already made a determination to put it on the agenda to review the county ordinances that were passed late last year. Now, because we are a quasi judicial body, the three of us, and we hear challenges to the system, and we have to rule on those. I can't sit here and tell you verbatim what I'm going to do. But we're going to take everything into consideration. We're going to review all of the facts. Based on that, we're going to make adjustments or adjustments, revisions, or cancellations to those ordinances that were passed last year. But remember,
Is there a state mandate on this?
yes, there's a state mandate. But the state mandate is not so definite that you can't adjust your plan and still be compliant. So it's a lot of maneuvering around, and that's what's coming next on that issue. Because there's not a specific ordinance on the gopher, we're not there yet. So we're kind of interjecting ourselves before we get to that point, if we can. So the wells, we're doing the same thing. We're looking at how are we going to approach that before there's something in place and still be compliant with the court decision. So there's a lot of balancing going on. I can tell you that we know that systems can last 70 years, because I lived that. And so as we proceed, we're going to take into consideration how many of those systems are truly in existence that are failing. And near as I can tell, that's going to be less than 1/4 of 1% of the septic systems in Thurston County might be susceptible to failing.
Well, it seems to me that the concern would be contamination of an aquifer.
Yeah.
That your groundwater, and of course, everybody would be concerned about that. So
Sure.
I think you suggested that that would probably be part of the analysis in determining, whether a septic system is functioning.
Yes.
That if you have a well adjacent or nearby, that the water is not being contaminated by
As
drainage.
as a general rule, and I'll just use the prairie here as an example, most of the wells here are, I'm going to say around 60 feet deep.
In the Yelm area, that's true.
Yeah, around Yelm,
Yeah.
something like that. Most of your septic systems in the Yelm area are probably, I don't know, 6, 7 feet at most, something like that.
Yeah.
So you've got quite an area, both above and below. And as long as you're not dumping really toxic stuff in there, Mother Nature has a pretty good handle on handling this whole process. And so because of that, you asked what is failing, a few questions back. Well, and that depends on the soil conditions and the consistency of the soil, the sand makeup, the clay makeup. There's a bunch of variables that come into play, but each one of them is slightly different. But your well 100 feet away, I have not known of anybody's well that's ever been affected by a septic system over here. It just doesn't happen because Mother Nature takes care of the problem. I guess unless it was a big fear back in the days when we had a lot of meth labs and people were flushing things down the toilet, that kind of thing. Chemicals, Mother Nature does not have the capacity to deal with chemicals the same as biologicals.
Right. There's some exotic chemicals.
Yeah, and that's pharmaceuticals, toxic chemicals, whatever it might be. So there's a big difference on the normal household system versus like commercial waste or illegal waste.
No, I want, just as a kind of a sidebar, I know here in Yelm, 25 years ago, it was determined that because you said 60 feet, a typical well in the Yelm area here, which is true, and there's a very shallow aquifer here, but what was happening is nitrates were starting to show up in the water, the drinking water, and nitrates can affect especially infants, small children, and so that's why I think there was an impetus to establish a sewer treatment facility.
Well, not only that, I believe
But that was because there was a concentration of homes and
That's right.
businesses here.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there's other layers of aquifers down there.
Yes.
And they might drill down to those to get around that as well.
Yeah.
But when it comes to that nitrate count, like you say, you keep drawing out of a well and you're drawing to it, And so when you drill a test well, the test well might not show that nitrate, but the usage well might because it keeps pulling in, from all around.
Yeah.
So we're also drilling test wells around different places to see,
Now, when you say.
so we have a comparison.
The county
The
is,
county is, yes,
as we speak.
as we speak. Yeah, I can't remember what we authorized the other day, but I think we've got about 8 wells going in. Right now, it's down around Scatter Creek, but it's for the same
Yeah.
concept that we're working on, because everybody wants clean water.
Yeah.
But if you go back to the government again, I don't want to sound so anti-government, but I live at Lawrence Lake. The government came around there and said, you guys have all this algae bloom in the lake and nutrient buildup in the lake because you've got failing septic systems. And, you know, I knew my system wasn't failing. I knew others that weren't failing. Because you can tell if you've got, there's greenery going down to the water and squish, squish, squish when you're walking around. There's a bunch of indicators, you know. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out. Anyway, we said, no, I don't think we have a problem. We created a lake management district, and again, that's where the citizens don't want dirty water. Everybody wants clean water. We taxed ourselves, put together a lake management district, paid for the testing ourselves, and did the flyover with infrared and dye, you know, photography and dye stuff in the tanks and all that. What we found out was there wasn't failing septic systems. We've been lied to again by the government. What it was lawn fertilizer was being utilized too close down around the water's edge. And so here comes the government telling us one thing, we had to go figure it out, find out it was another thing. So through education, we try to encourage people, you know, hey, you know, watch when you're spreading this stuff, stay back and all that. And then you've got wildlife. Goose is the main, goose is the culprit.
Yeah.
He's living thick on Lawrence Lake,
Yeah.
and goose manure is bad.
They're fertilizer.
It's, well, yeah, but it even kills things. I mean, it's so bad. That's compared to chicken manure, it's worse. And so we have to take all that stuff into consideration. And as government does things like this, they lose credibility. And that's unfortunate. Because again, getting back to what I want from government is I want all public policy based on the truth, the whole truth.
Well, it sounds like these wells, that you're bringing science into the
Oh, science is part of that truth. We want the whole truth.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. You sort of campaigned on this issue also of promoting economic development county, and what does that look like to you, and what kinds of economic development do you think would be a good fit in this? And does the county have kind of an economic development strategy?
Well, we, other than working with the Economic Development Council,
Yeah.
which is business and all those players
Yeah.
coming together, we work with them. But we do have one person that is involved in trying to coordinate things that are beneficial to the whole economic picture, if you will. And just a real, a bad example, let's use a bad example, is Ritchie Brothers Auction down in Maytown.
I'm familiar with that.
Okay.
Used construction equipment.
Yeah, it's an auction house and they sell millions of dollars.
Bulldozers,
construction.
trucks. Yeah.
Quite a tax benefit to the citizens of Thurston County having that.
Yeah.
Very environmentally conscious people, Canadians, by the way, the owners of that company. Anyway, Diane Overcrow, when she was commissioner, and I went to them because we heard they wanted to find a place between Seattle and Portland. And we thought, what a dynamite place. So we went and solicited them and got them to move here. But after Diane retired and I went away, and shortly thereafter, the county ran them out over regulation. If you take a trip down through Lewis County and go about, I don't know, it's about 15 miles down on the other side of Maytown, or Rochester area, they've got a facility down there that they built that's just, oh, it's great. And Lewis County is getting all that revenue now.
So Ritchie's brothers moved to
Lewis County.
So
Because they couldn't stand the over-regulation coming out of Thurston. And that's the same thing that led to the Maytown gravel pit lawsuit.
Yeah.
And the county lost $10 million
So
in that lawsuit.
you have an economic, yeah, there are economic development entities, Thurston County Chamber, et cetera. As county commissioner, what do you think you can add to that mix as far as bringing new jobs, promoting new business?
Well,
Does it look like there's sort of a realistic pathway for you?
oh yeah. Just by having a change of attitude at the courthouse, not just from the commissioners, but from staff. And you have to realize that attitude comes from the top. And for 20 years, that attitude has been no growth, no business, no houses, and everything stayed status quo. Well, if you don't have that growth, you don't have resources to provide for the health department, the road department, you know, the different things that government ought to be providing for the population. You just don't have them. So if you don't have an economic engine going, you can't keep up. We have the lowest number of deputy sheriffs per 1,000 of any county in the state of Washington. We're the 7th populous county, and we should reflect that in certain, and I just use that as one example. So if you don't have adequate economic growth, you become stagnant, and that's where we're at today.
Well, I know you've only been there for...
Yeah, I haven't got it fixed yet, I've only been there.
You haven't fixed it yet. Are you pretty optimistic?
Oh, very much so.
Can catalyze...
Yep. Yep, we've got a good plan. We're resetting priorities, and we're changing that attitude. And you really can't blame the staff down there. If they lived under a direction for 20 years,
Yeah.
they become accustomed to, well, that's the way we're supposed to go. We've got new direction. Now, it's kind of like a aircraft carrier going south. Those are big critters, and they take miles to stop. So if you want to even turn it around, you got to slow it down first.
Right, yeah.
Then you got to turn it around. And I'm not going to say we're going to go straight north, because just because we're going straight south, we're not. Maybe we're not going to go 180 degrees. Maybe we're only going to go 160 degrees, because there's room for compromise, because we do want to protect the environment, take care of those that are less fortunate, and have a great economic engine and a great quality of life. So we've got a lot of things to deal with.
You anticipated my next question, and I know we've probably gone over time here a little bit, but this has been very fascinating. Quality of life in Thurston County. What do you see 50 years, 100 years? And can we have growth and maintain quality of life here? A lot of people move here because of the quality of life, and they don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. You can have growth with good planning, good design. So what would you think this county would look like in 50 years? We're a rapidly growing county, right?
That's right. And I think our urban core is going to grow faster than rural America. I mean, it's just the way it is.
In part because of growth management in the state of Washington.
That is part of it, but also because of lifestyles. People coming here, I don't know, let's say they're coming from New York, I don't know where they're coming from. But if they're coming from a city, for an example, they want city services. Mostly, they don't want to come and live in rural America, mostly. I'm not saying they can't, they can if they want to. And that's what I would like to see down the road. We're going to have growth. The urban core is going to grow more than the rural area. What we want to have, I'll say I, because I can't speak for the commission at this point in time, but I think we're a like-thinking body, but you know, we have our disagreements. And I believe that by having that growth where the bus runs, where the fire department is, where the septic system is, where the water is, where the services are, where the restaurants are, I mean, you're going to have that, so that appeals to a certain clientele. And we want we also want to appeal to that group that wants the little house on the prairie with the white picket fence and the backyard and a garden. You know, to me, that's the American dream. To someone else, living in a condo on the waterfront might be the American dream. But I want people to experience that on their own without government forcing them to do one thing or the other. Now, there's not been another. It's only been one way. But that's my vision of how we can proceed. On the other hand, we don't want somebody with $1 million house here having a beat up, inherited, leaky dog shed over here with the septic running over on this guy's place. So we need reasonable regulation.
Is this where the common sense thing comes in?
Yeah, I'm hoping common sense can apply.
Yeah.
So we want everybody to be able to live their life
Yeah.
as long as they don't adversely affect the other person.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have that 5 acres, and I say 5 because that's kind of a zoning issue, and because of growth management and some of that kind of stuff, but they've went too far. In some places they're telling you, well, no, you got to have 20 acres to have one house. That's not really reasonable because someone, and this is a real story, bought 40 acres some years back, and instead of investing in their 401k, they put land payments down to get their piece of heaven with the idea they're going to live here and they want one of the kids to live here and take care of them. They want to sell these couple of parcels, and 5 acres was kind of the normal thing. And I want that to proceed, and we can protect the groundwater. Modern septic systems, not 1914 Fords buried in there, but modern septic tank systems can handle that type of growth, as long as it's all reasonable, regulated, not overly regulated, but regulated.
Yeah. I'd like to tell a short story. I'm a biologist myself, and was a senior planner at the Department of Ecology. The state of Oregon has 3.5 million people. And I think you're all familiar with the United Kingdom, which is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. The United Kingdom is about the same size as the state of Oregon. The United Kingdom has 60+ million people living in an area the size of Oregon. It seems to me one of the challenges for us human beings is, as we move into the future, how do we accommodate? Could you imagine 60 million people living in the state of Washington? Right now we have...
I think I'm not going to be here when that happens. I think my time is here. But I have a plan. I do have a plan.
Yeah.
And I think as we grow, we're going to be developing new technologies and new concepts and processes. And just as an example, there's a new sewer process that's now, I don't know if you call it on the books, but it's being unveiled, so to speak. And it's come about because of the space age. And because of our spaceships re-entering, they had to come up with material that could withstand heat and retain its integrity.
Right.
So I think they've got stuff, tiles that can go 5,000 degrees or whatever it is, and still maintain its shape and stuff. Well, some smart guy came up with a deal where if you inject stuff without any oxygen into this 5,000 degree container, and what it does is it breaks everything down and it's molecular. And you're asking the wrong guy. I mean, you know more about this than I do. I'm just talking about concept now. But it does exist today. It's a new concept. And you end up with inert material that is no longer hazardous to any way, shape, or form to the environment. It gets rid of pharmaceuticals, which pharmaceuticals are a big issue for those that are concerned about the environment. And in putting this system in place, they do horizontal drilling. And it's hard to believe, but they can actually pump from thousands of homes through 2-inch pipes. And it has to do with timing, collector locations for septic, grinders, pumps at certain times. It gets to the treatment facility, it does a spin out, then those damp solids are injected. You end up with a byproduct that actually can create the heat for the burn-off process, or they can make plastics out of that product. And you possibly know what it is, some kind of a methane material. But it's got a value in the commercial industry, and they make, I don't know, water bottles and stuff out of it. But it's a new concept, but it's darn hard to get anybody to pay attention to it because everybody's invested in their thing, doing it the way they do it, you know.
Well,
So we have to think of change.
I'm sort of sensing you're kind of cutting edge yourself. You're well interested in.
I live here, and I love living here, and I've got kids and grandkids, and I want them to love
Well,
living here.
could this, you seem to be inquisitive and open, very open to new things. Could that be part of the recruitment of business? In other words, could Thurston County begin to develop a reputation for inviting these people who are developing these new innovations that could lead to this county becoming very unique and forward-thinking relative to moving from what some might call the feedback approach, where you're responding to, reacting to the problems, to anticipating the problems, and bringing people in who are thinkers and cutting edge themselves in the various areas of science that could make a difference here. It sounds, you're going to kind of work on the Canadians
Well, I think it's criminal. To be honest with you, what I wanted to do, and somebody said you got to tone that down, I said, hey, they've been talking about fixing this up in Victoria for 100 years.
Yeah, and the killer whales are under siege also.
And that's because our salmon are polluted.
Yeah.
I mean, I can get into a whole dissertation about, you know, the Nisqually River, and let's use that as the end result, and passing through that sewer cloud from Victoria over the last 100 years. And I use 100 years because we've had big, massive electric motors for the last 100 years. And they've got a big, massive electric motor that pumps out into the Strait of Juan de Fuca. I'd like to send a cruise missile up there, but they tell me that's not politically correct. So
Actually,
I have to come up with something else.
we're kind of running out.
Economic boycott.
We're kind of running out of time, but you mentioned something that kind of resonated with me. Lawrence Lake, you said, was sort of a large holding pond that fed into the
Deschutes River down to Tomo.
And downriver, there was a hydroelectric.
There was a hydroelectric plant down by the brewery.
Well, you know, one of the things that people are investigating these days is small-scale hydro. Is that something the commissioner's working with Tumwater, the city of Tumwater? Could you bring back a small-scale hydro facility? Because the Deschutes never was a salmon spawning.
Not until about 1952.
And there's a fish ladder there now, so it doesn't seem to me that would interrupt.
No.
Yeah, maybe that's something you could take on.
Well, not only that, but there's a Deschutes Falls that's got about 70 feet of drop.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
No, I mean the falls up above.
Oh,
There's a falls down below and a falls up above. Both of them have power lines to them,
Yeah.
and both of them could generate electricity.
Is that something you could?
Oh, I'd be sure. I'm always.
Stimulate?
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. I mean, I've actually talked about that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was on the county park board when we bought that property up there at Deschutes Falls that you're talking about. So I know what you're talking about. Okay.
That's cool.
Is Mayor Foster here? My last question here is, Gary, how do you see the county working with the cities and specifically the relationship with the city of Yelm? Are there some possibilities? Can we kind of break some new ground in that regard and chime in, JW? In fact, I think you were going to.
I would just answer that with yes, and we've got a great relationship, and I'll let JW expand where he thinks that ought to go.
Well, it's been a great last couple of years. We've noticed it already, and the South County cities 10 years ago weren't even asked to come to the table. It was all about up north, and we've got things sort of like dribbled down. In the last few years, we've made a concerted effort to engage in that conversation more firmly, and we've established some great relationships with Thurston County, with the Economic Development Council and the chambers. We're at the table. In fact, I just sat in on the Community Investment Partnership retreat 2 days ago, where we worked with United Way and the Thurston County Social and Health Services Department to create the rules by which people can apply for large money grants to provide things like housing and services for underprivileged people. And now that we're at the table helping to make the rules, we can actually apply for those monies and bring it back out to rural county. That wouldn't have happened a few years ago. So there's a bit of a sea change there, and it's in part because we as the local government got involved, but it's also in part because we've got people like Gary and Bud and John up there who are willing to work cooperatively with us now too.
So is there some overlap in conversation related to economic development?
Absolutely. And the EDC has already reached out to us. There's a group formed called the South Thurston Economic Development Initiative. It's a branch of the EDC that's come out specifically to help businesses and the communities in South County.
Could I mention one thing? If you want to go to a SETI meeting, there's one tomorrow morning at 7:30 down in Bucota.
That's right.
So you can pick up your breakfast over at Joe's place, go across the road.
What's the purpose of that meeting? What's the purpose of that meeting?
Well, all about developing this whole plan about buying local, promoting business here local, and it's the whole South County activity from an economic development standpoint. I don't know if that's
No, that's
clear.
exactly right. And they've already come out and put on classes right here in Yelm for local businesses. If you call them up and say, I've got a business, I'm struggling a little bit, I'd like to know what else I could do to make it better, this group will come out and will help you. They'll put you in a program, help you lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. They give you those tools and the support. Because they finally realized, and it's an overused term, but a rising tide floats all boats. And they realize what's good out here is good for the county as well, for the urban core as well. So we got those programs started.
Great. Gary, Thurston County, relative to all of the other counties in the state, are we doing pretty well?
No.
Are,
But we're going to be doing pretty well.
Are we in the top 20%?
No, our economic engine is really hurting right now. And that's why we can't provide adequate services right now. But I feel within a couple of years, we're going to have that economic engine running, sparking along, creating revenue, and then we're going to be able to provide the services that go along with a vibrant economy.
This is, we have some powerhouse businesses in the Seattle area. We have Amazon and Microsoft and you name it. The state of Washington, relative to other states, is a powerhouse.
Sure it is.
It's concentrated in the Seattle area, and you go to Eastern Washington, and they would definitely acknowledge that. In fact, they even talk about, breaking off and creating their own state because they're not real happy with that scene. With those companies up there and the congestion that exists up there, and something that we can offer here is quality of life. We have this Thurston Highlands, a square mile that's just sitting there sort of vacant. Is there any possibility that we could invite, a satellite operation of them, as a satellite of Microsoft, to come down here and enjoy the view of Mount Rainier, take raft trips with JW on the Nisqually River?
I'll take it.
I mean, is that a selling point that could?
It's very much a selling point, Steve. And I mentioned Ritchie Brothers early on, and that's exactly how we did get Ritchie Brothers here. We heard they were looking. We've got people over at the EDC that have their ear to the ground all the time. I know of something like that fit. JW and I go to wherever they were and try to sell them on the how wonderful it is right here and to come here. Now, when I travel though, I tell everybody it rains here. If I go elsewhere, it rains every day. Every day. So I don't want too many people getting the idea. But we do need to build that economic engine, and that means jobs, because I know, JW probably wants his kids working here. I want my kids, my grandkids, I want them to go to work here. And so does everybody else. We want to participate in the American dream right here without traveling elsewhere. And I think we can do it.
Okay. All right.
I do want to chime in there to take the opportunity. Since I've only been mayor since August, but one of the first things I did was reach out to those partners that would help us develop the businesses that we have here and attract new businesses. And I was able to take advantage of a couple of opportunities where I went up to where they were. One of the meetings I went to was with the what they call themselves, the International Association of Shopping Centers. That sounds like really big, but they represented all sizes of businesses and real estate brokers. And it was speed dating for cities is what they called it. There were 20 cities that went up in front of this group, and they were trying to shop their city. And all of these bigger cities were like, oh, we're so big and we have all these freeways and we got all these people and storefronts and stuff. And I went up and said, and what we have in Yelm is a beautiful place to live for you and your employees and your customers, and the best view of Mount Rainier, period.
They're here anyway, so we don't need to tell them.
I know, I was telling them. And I had people coming up to me afterwards and said, tell me more about Yelm. And I've gotten phone calls from small to moderate sized businesses that are already interested in coming out because of that quality of life that we maintain here.
I think it's a card that we can play.
It is, absolutely.
Okay, let's open it up to the audience. Are there some questions out there of Gary Edwards?
Make sure that they speak on microphone.
We have a microphone right up here for the question. You want to put it down on the main floor there? Okay. Did we cover everything and ran out of questions?
Yep. Yes. Nope.
Thanks for coming. I just, we mentioned briefly the sheriff's office, and I recently, about a month ago, had my house broken into and lived here in Yelm, and it's been a really horrible experience. And you can imagine, just they made a big mess and stole what they could. But the sheriff's office seems awfully scant and not able to really even get follow-up on property crime. And I just wondered if there was some. They're hopeful that you're going to make a big change there, is what I'm hearing. So I just wondered if you could address that a little bit.
I guess the way I would approach that is, I'm sympathetic to the needs of the sheriff's office, having been a lawman, for 40 years. But I'm also a realist, and without adequate economic development and resources, just say to hire deputy sheriffs, for an example, let alone house them and put them in a car and all that. It just isn't feasible that we add more people until we get that economic engine running. And that's going to probably take a couple of years. But the reality is, the reason you've got situations like that is the legislature has passed laws that I look at as kind of enabling laws. And let's just say it's the second, we catch the person or persons, and it's the second time they've done a burglary, and and you're out. I mean, you might be out some family heirloom or something precious to you that can never be replaced. You're just out. And the judge basically, until it's their 5th burglary,
What?
pretty much slap them on the hand
This?
and send them down the road. And that is very unfortunate, but there's a cost to criminal justice. And now, I'm going to take your question and go just quickly a little farther on. From my first days as a lawman, I realized that if we didn't invest in our kids and have early intervention, that we were going to either pay for it early on, or we're going to pay for it later in our prison system. And so I'm also very concerned that we handle our future properly. And when I say our future, our kids are our future. And they're going to be in charge of everything a few years down the road. For me, it's closer than others. But anyway, it's coming. And we really need to invest in those kids. And I can tell you right now, I'm meeting with a group tomorrow, and that is called, okay, well.
This is with your brother?
Yeah, it is. Why, do you know he's coming down for
No, you
this?
told me. And you told me the name of the group.
It's an advancement of another organization, Fight Crime, Invest in Kids. And the idea was to be involved with kids early on so you didn't have to fight crime. Ready Nation. Ready Nation is what it is.
Yep.
And those folks are all about making sure that young people get the proper opportunity so they become a viable product for the Microsofts and the Googles and different ones to hire. So make them a workforce ready so they can go to work. So to me, it's all about our kids and intervening early so they don't become burglars. Now, in the meantime, I think we got to hold them accountable, and I think more than a slap on the hand is what it takes. And that is a whole nother show that could go on for several weeks, I'm sure. But I feel bad for victims. I've heard those stories for many, 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 many years. Auto theft, I think it's 7 times we have to apprehend and convict for auto theft. 7 different instances before they'll spend a year in custody. So it's a learning process for young criminals. It's not a deterrent. And when I say a learning process, they go for, a couple weeks, a couple of months, and they learn from other folks that are there for 6 months or 8 months. And it's just kind of a criminal enterprise, teaching these young people how to be better crooks, how not to get caught. And we need to reinvest our whole thinking process as a society to keep that from happening. And there's ways to do it. Yeah, jump in there.
Steve, before, and just to tag in on that, it's not just the programs like this, but this morning I met with the South Sound Council on Career and Technical Education. And our school system here in Yelm has one of the best career and technical education programs in the state of Washington. We offer some 40 different pathways for students to find careers right out of high school rather than the traditional four-year college plan, which isn't for everybody. So we're looking at different ways to get people engaged and get them working into the communities and giving back locally.
Well, you're raising an interesting point here because Germany is probably considered in Europe the most successful country. And when you kind of look at their educational program, they put a huge amount of emphasis on apprenticeships. And so not everyone has to be going to college, and somehow we beat that drum, and a lot of young people that's not their pathway.
Yeah.
And if you provide alternative pathways, because ultimately what you're looking for is every kid becomes successful in whatever they do, whether they're a plumber, electrician, a carpenter, a mechanic, whatever it is, over there they take pride in those trades and skills. That it's not looked down upon, and that apprenticeship extends throughout the whole system in Germany, and that's one of the, you talk about a smooth running machine, but Germany is.
Yeah.
And it's something to take a look at, and you know, even here in Yelm, you're talking about the kind of the technical institute is provide alternatives for these young people.
And Skills USA is a spin-off of that.
Yeah.
Same kind of a thing, get those kids going in the right direction. And if you think about it, 4-H and FFA, all of those type of programs are beneficial as well. I've always been an advocate for kids. You can't invest too much in kids, but you don't want to enable them either. I mean, you can't just give them everything. You have to work a little bit for it. But anytime you invest in kids, you're investing in the future. I always had a saying that kids are, I don't know, 25% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. And we really need to pay attention to that.
Good point, good point. Any other questions?
Yeah, about the slopes.
Could you come up to the...
Well, it's actually quick. Addressing the slopes and property rights. Okay.
You're talking about hills?
Yeah, we have a piece of property that we want to subdivide, and it's got golfers and it's got a slope. And,
Okay.
You have flooding too?
we're above ground.
Well, without knowing your particulars, I have a hard enough time talking intelligently about topics that I can know all the facts, let alone when I don't know all the facts. But those are issues. I know slopes, we don't want to also, you know, that's the main thing that's about. As far as dividing property up, we want to protect the environment because nobody wants dirty water and dirty air. But there's compromise, there's common sense. There's ways we can do it that are practical ways to proceed. That's about the best way I can put it without knowing what your situation is.
It's 10 acres. We have already a septic in and electric and the basic print. We want to subdivide it and have my daughter live on the same property.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, I happen to know about this one. We're changing the code so that if you have a piece of property, and I don't know where you're at zoning-wise, but I like to think about proximity as a big play in housing, for an example. And so if you're next to a development and all the lots are half acre and you've got 10 acres, well, I'm just using that as an example, then you ought to be able to at least divide yours into 4 pieces, for an example. You know, so proximity as you go out from that particular development. But what you're referring to, I think, is what we've referred to over the years as the mother-in-law house. And currently, the code in Thurston County requires that that be a modular, mobile, non-permanent residence. Now,
Yes, I'm aware of that.
okay, that's what it is today. We're changing that, so it will become a stick-built residence for mom, but it does not immediately become, well, it never becomes illegal for mom passes away, then you can rent it to the school teacher or whatever you want. Right now, if mom passed away and you were under the guidelines of today, technically you have to remove that modular. But what we're proposing is, why not let them build a decent place? Mom's gone, rent it out. Now you have to have proper soils and all that kind of stuff and adequate water. There's some other things that come into play, but let's use common sense when we implement those things. And where you've got 5 or 10 acres, I would guess it's feasible that possibly that could be split and you could do something. But without knowing the particulars, the lay of the land, the soils, there's so many variables that come into it that it's hard for me to sit up here and just make an assumption, not knowing exactly.
Well, I didn't expect that.
But we are headed in your direction. We're on your side.
Any other?
Title 26.
Hey, Steve.
Let's.
So this is just kind of to maybe expand a little bit on our future, the kids. Now, granted, I just had my 40th birthday, so I'm still a young pup.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
But I even remember back in the, in the early 90s when I was going to school, when I started even my junior high years, there was always activities. There was school dances, there were community-sponsored dances. There was Pacific International Raceway put on stuff for the kids all the time, dances, concerts. There was always stuff going on. And what I've noticed, and this even started as I went into high school in '90, that one by one, all of these activities vanished. All the curricular activities vanished from not only the schools, but the communities, right? So all that was left was kids with absolutely nothing to do, running around graffitiing stuff and stealing your vehicles, right? Because they had nothing else to occupy their time.
Yeah.
Is there any way that maybe we could get back to, you know?
There it is, the
Well,
culprit.
I'm hearing your question, and it's a pretty deep societal issue when it comes, society in general has to deal with this, but I can even go back farther before there was television. When I was a kid, and we would go, to a lot of family picnics and the Grange social and a lot of different activities that we participated in. Maybe a neighborhood ball game. Well, anyway, when TV came about, it started to change.
Yeah.
And this is an extension of that. And no, I didn't mean for it to do that. Anyway, that is probably a part of the problem. But the reality is, if you look at our labor laws, you know it's illegal for you to hire a young person to mow your lawn
Yeah.
till they're 18.
Oops.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Oops.
And a lot of us are in violation of that once in a while. But anyway, we've created that type of an environment that our kids are growing up in. I think I might have mentioned that I started paying Social Security taxes through Mr. Reichel, and I want to say I was 11 or 12 at the time. That's what my records show. And it was a very small amount of money, but that's when he was a stickler. And he started, and I could do that. Now, I wasn't a very big person at the time, just a kid, and all I could do was drive the tractor. But I could mow a lawn, I could drive the tractor, I started working. Today, our kids can't do that. So, but there are alternatives. There's boys and girls clubs, there's scouting programs, there's other areas where hopefully if parents would, and I'm not criticizing you, but I'm hoping that parents will become more involved. Schools have activities. So anytime you can promote that type of thing, it keeps those kids out of trouble. I mean, to me, Boys and Girls Club, I was involved in founding the Boys and Girls Club here in Olympia. And I just think it's a real success. And so we're trying, we got something. I mean, we've been talking to those folks about coming out here.
Well, we were successful in getting it started down in Tenino. We've got a good program there. Boys and Girls Clubs are already out here with small programs. The YMCA is already doing small in-school programs, but Yelm is to the point now where they're actually able to do larger programs. And we're in that conversation with them, as you've probably seen with the YMCA. Nothing promised, but we're going in that direction. And we do have a lot of things for kids to do. Sometimes the kids got to go out and look for them. But one of the things Yelm's done in the past decade is we've built things like skate parks. We've enlarged our parks. We've got a trail system. We're going to have a splash park, whether you like it or not. We're going to have it. It's going to be great for low-income families and children to recreate without having to spend any money. And so we're always looking as a council and city to find more opportunities for our kids, because you're right.
And we can't invest enough in our kids.
Nope.
Not give away, not make life too easy, but we can't invest enough.
Yeah,
Like
it was
I've
a little
always
crazy
said.
at my school, because at high school, there was 3,700 kids in our
Oh,
school.
wow.
Auburn High was at that time the biggest school in the state,
Yeah.
population-wise. I mean, they just kept stacking portables on top of each other.
It's compared to your
So,
69.
But, yeah, they always had stuff going on. though.
30.
I just noticed that even as my kids have grown up now and moved on and doing their thing, there's just so much less stuff for them to do. I mean, I started my sound career in Wall Edge nightclub. You know, you could be 10 years old up to, 50. You could come and hang out. There was all soda pop and candy bars, which I lived on while I was there. And, there was cool little high school bands that would come and bring their friends, and it was just a really neat thing. And a lot of those kids, even today, you can go back and they still wonder what happened to clubs like that. That one actually got sold to NC Machinery, and they go,
If you go back to what Hillary said, it does take a village to make it all work.
yeah.
It really does.
Keep an eye too on the Nisqually Valley News, shameless plug for the Nisqually Valley News. They pay me to do that every once in a while. They have an events calendar, and there are a lot of those smaller organizations. Our Lions Club in town puts on movies in the park throughout the summertime, all free. And some of the church groups are putting on kids' events, but sometimes you have to look for them. But we're doing more and more as a community. Like I've always said, children are 25% of our. I didn't do it good. It's a valid point.
I would like to just make a quick comment, because this theater is making a contribution in that regard.
Absolutely.
Just before we sat up here, there were, I would guess, 25 kids in here taking acting lessons. And who knows where that's going to go, what career path that may be introduced to them. Not to mention all of the other teenagers who are getting involved in live plays here, in music, in poetry. So I think Jane has done a wonderful job of bringing So we've kept you over, and I apologize, Gary, for this. It's after 9 o'clock. We started at about 7, but I noticed I didn't really see anybody head for the exit. And I want to thank the audience, everybody who came tonight. I hope you learned something, that you got to know a little more in depth our county commissioner and the commitment that he has made. Gary, everything starts with a conversation, and we had a great conversation this evening, and I appreciate you coming and sharing your life experience and your thoughts about Thurston County.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Okay. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. You guys are good.